Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like-minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but 2 of my last 3 trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 188. Today we talk about beer, Mad Kings, and cuckoo clocks as we go to Bavaria and Southern Germany. Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we get into this week's interview, I do have some news stories for you. Here's a young man, a young American tourist who had difficulty with the idea of catching a train. In the southern outback, he managed to climb onto a train because he thought he was going to miss it. He ended up outside the train in a stairwell as the train hit speeds of 200 kilometers per hour until someone finally managed to hear him. Tell me if this seems like a good idea to you. An airline worker had a friend who was moving, and he was taking a plane and wanted to take one of his guns with him, unloaded, I might add, and the airline worker helped him smuggle it aboard the plane. They got caught. They're both in jail. Yeah, don't do that. Since a recent study came out and said the airline industry is about to lose $9 billion, it may be good news that a study came out this week that said that for the environment, a train might be worse than a plane. And this is taking into account the full life cycle emission by 11 different means of transportation. This is going to cause some controversy. I can imagine. But you can check out that story as well as the other stories I mentioned at the show notes at amateurtraveler.com. I'd like to welcome back Jason and Janie from Charlottesville, Virginia, who come to talk to us about Bavaria and Southern Germany. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us, Chris.
I say welcome back to the show because they were on talking about Barbados about a year and a half ago, you tell me?
Something like that. You know, time flies when you get past 100 episodes.
So you had a chance to go to southern Germany, and we say Bavaria, which is the southernmost state, but also some other areas near there.
Yes.
Why did you go? What was the attraction?
I was stationed in Germany while I was in the Army.
Oh, okay.
So I lived there for 3 years, and the person that I lived with is now stationed in Germany again. So it was an opportunity for us to go back and visit them. And Janie had never been, so she had heard 3 years worth of stories about my revelry in Germany and hadn't actually seen the land that I was talking about. So I was very excited to have her come along.
And where were you stationed in Germany?
I was stationed in Friedberg, which is about 45 minutes northwest of Frankfurt. So I was probably 4 hours northwest of Munich.
Okay. And you bring up Munich because Munich being the capital of Bavaria.
Correct.
Okay. So when we go to the southern portion of Germany, what should we see?
Our trip consisted of a few areas, I know one of which you've already covered, but we'd like to talk about it again. So we started our trip and we actually went into the Black Forest. Mm-hmm. And the typical Black Forest tourist trail takes you to Baden-Baden, which is where the rich and the glamorous do their baths and their spas.
Right.
But we decided to go off the beaten path, and we went to a town called Treberg, which has the distinction of two very interesting tourist attractions. One is it has the highest waterfall in Germany, and there's a little family-friendly trail that you can hike up, and it only takes about probably 20 to 30 minutes to hike up the trail to see the waterfall. And then the second, and probably the more well-known thing for the Black Forest, is it's the home of the cuckoo clock. In fact, right outside of Treberg is the world's largest cuckoo clock.
And when we say world's largest...
Yes, it is physically the world's largest working cuckoo clock.
Yeah, it's the size of probably a small shed.
Okay.
And you can actually walk into it and tour it, which is really neat because you see all the gears moving and you see how it works. And it's sort of like being, I don't know, in Santa's workshop in a way because it's very cute. And they have somebody there that explains to you exactly how the clock works and what makes the cuckoo go. And it was really, really cool.
Okay.
And there's actually a bellows that is depressed, which is what makes the cuckoo sound. And then there's a gear with gradually wider opening teeth so that the cuckoo stays out longer. So the gap between 11 and 12 is much larger than the gap between 2 and 3. And that's how the cuckoo bird knows to stay out longer. The other interesting thing about the world's largest cuckoo clock is that it actually loses about 4 minutes a day. So they have to pull on the weights about every 6 hours in order for it to keep running. And then it loses time every day, so they have to make an adjustment at the beginning of the day before all the tourists come in.
Little secret.
After we did Treberg, we went to a little small town called Gengenbach, which is home of several wineries. So Germany's got a fairly thriving wine industry. Probably the most well-known would be the Riesling. Mm-hmm. And so we went to Gengenbach. There is a very, very attractive old town square. So all the old town squares are called Altstadts, Altstadt.
Old
and
city.
Most of your German cities have them. It's sort of like the old town square. Mm-hmm. And so this one's just got a very interesting little town square with gates on both sides. And then as you go outside of the gates, you see a lot of wineries. So there are a couple of places that are distributors of the wines, so you can go in and do the wine tastings without having to go from winery to winery. So it's a wonderful area. You can walk the entire town, and it takes about a day to do.
And we're talking German wine, so I'm assuming we're talking white wine.
Yes, definitely. Okay. And typically sweeter white wine as well.
The sugars taste different. A Riesling that you buy in the United States will taste much different. It's got a drier sweetness than the wine that you would buy in Germany.
Okay.
So a definite different experience for the palate. And if you're a red wine lover, as the Germans say, es tut mir leid, I'm very sorry. But their white wines are wonderful.
And this little city, Gengenbach, is where Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was filmed, the movie with Johnny Depp.
Oh, okay.
And it is just unbelievably picturesque. I'm looking at the pictures right now, and you just almost can't believe that a town this cute exists. It's a wonderful little place.
I remember we were driving in and someone in the car said, "Wow, this looks like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory." And it was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. So this really is where it was filmed. And then we went to Nuremberg. It's mainly known for a couple of things. The first thing that it's known for, even though it wasn't the official capital, it was the seat of the Holy Roman Empire. So every time a new emperor was crowned, he had to come to Nuremberg to hold his first parliament session and, in effect, to kiss the ring. The second thing that Nuremberg is known for is the Nuremberg trials after World War II,
right,
where all the Nazi officials were tried by the occupation government. Very picturesque, has a very nice castle on top of the hill, has a wonderful Altstadt that can be walked in probably a half a day with a lot of bridges. There's a river that divides the city. That whole area is very pedestrian friendly. They have very large pedestrian zones. They also have a wonderful, it's called a Marktplatz, which is a marketplace where you can buy fresh fruit and vegetables. So if you're going to many of these German cities, especially the smaller, older cities, you can pretty much skip your lunch and buy fresh fruit and vegetables and just nibble and munch on them. And it's also usually a good way to save money if you're traveling on a budget.
And I recall racing to get to the central square of Nuremberg by noon so that we could hear the town's clock strike noon and go through all of the different characters coming out and celebrating that it was noon.
Yes,
Yeah.
It has that, and we'll talk about the other notable clock, which is in Munich, in a minute. But it is also part of the Marktplatz. There's a square where they have all the markets, and what we recommend, and we thought was very good, is there are a couple of cafes. If you're facing the clock off to your right side, there are cafes that are on the second story of the buildings that line that edge of the Marktplatz. And you can go up and grab a coffee, grab a beer, grab a Riesling, although Riesling might be a little early for noon, and sit there, and you're above the crowds and you're away from the crowds. So you're plenty close enough to actually see what's happening and to hear the bells, but you're far enough away from the crowds that you don't get the hustle bustle and the jostling.
Okay. We should say the other thing that it's well known for, and the reason why you're not mentioning it is because of your next destination, is it's also well known for its Christmas market.
Yes, it is well known for its Christmas market.
But
although my personal favorite Christmas market when I lived in Germany was in Rothenburg.
Okay.
And again, this may be my leaning towards smaller towns. So Rothenburg was an independent free city for most of the Middle Ages. It has buildings that date back to the 900s, and I'll actually get to the oldest building in a minute. But Rothenburg is known very much for the wall that goes around the city.
right.
When you go to Rothenburg, one of the things that you should make sure that you do is the Night Watchman's Tour. This gentleman is a very dashing character. He's very easy to see. He leads a tour in English at 6 p.m., and I took the same tour in 1997. And it was the same gentleman that led the tour. He's very entertaining, very knowledgeable. The tour takes about an hour. If you have difficulties walking, there are a few hills. He goes at a relatively slow pace, but if you're going to have trouble walking more than about 3 kilometers, then he also sells DVDs. So you can always get the Night Watchman's DVD.
On Amazon.
And it's on Amazon. He's very famous.
One of the 3 video episodes the Amateur Traveler has done, or that I have done, I don't know why I'm referring to myself suddenly in the third person, I've done 3 on Rothenburg, and 1 included portions of the Night Watchman tour for anybody who wants just a little taste of that.
Yep, and then he would appreciate it if you bought the full version. It has a wall that's about 2.5 kilometers that you can go up into the wall and see where all the defenders of the wall would walk around. And there is a particularly interesting piece of the towers. So the towers that have the gates that lead into the city, you see masks above the gates. The defenders, as they were being attacked, would close off the gates, and they were usually facing a hill, so you had to go up the hill and then try and ram down the door. Meanwhile, the defenders would pour hot pitch out of the eyes and the mouth of these masks that were on top of the tower and poured down the boiling oil, the hot pitch, and then whatever else they could find onto the attackers.
Yeah, the masks were sort of just holes in the stone wall that looked like eyes and nose and mouth.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember seeing that. It's interesting.
The other thing that, as I mentioned, Rothenburg is very well known for is the Christkindlmarkt, which is the Christmas market. It is not as big as the Christmas market in Nuremberg, but to me, it's a little bit more authentic. If you go during the winter time, first of all, you get Glühwein, which is the warm mulled wine, which will chase away any level of cold. They're also known for something called snowballs. It's a powdered sugar-covered pastry.
Schneeball.
And yes, a Schneeball. They also have a Christmas museum where you learn things like that ornaments are actually representations of the apple for Adam and Eve. And for the uninformed, you can always tell the tourist because the tourist actually bites into the Schneeball and then they get a face full of powder. So the trick to eating a Schneeball is to keep it in the bag and to whack it a few times to where it breaks up and then take out the pieces and eat the pieces so that you keep from getting it all over yourself.
And if we wanted to describe it, it's almost like someone has taken pie dough, confabulated it together in some sort of Gordian knot, and then deep fried it. Good stuff.
Yep.
And covered it in powdered sugar and just tasty goodness.
You can also get them in chocolate and hazelnut.
Right.
And the other thing is, if you're going to get a Schneeball, don't go to the Schneeball factories. So they have little Schneeball shops that are all along the main streets. And again, Rothenburg, being a small old town, doesn't have many cars. It's very pedestrian friendly. And so you see all of these. Instead, go to a bakery. Bakeries tend to be where the locals get their Schneeballs, and they tend to be a little bit better and a little bit fresher.
Okay.
So after Rothenburg, we actually went south of Munich to Neuschwanstein. Neuschwanstein was the castle of Mad King Ludwig. Ludwig was the Bavarian king. He actually was the king, I believe, after the U.S. Civil War. And he built three castles, which were dedicated to madness. We did not go to Hohenschwangau, which you can see from Neuschwanstein.
Which is where he grew up, as I recall.
Yes. We went to Neuschwanstein, which, if you recall The Wonderful World of Disney, as Tinkerbell comes flying out of the castle, Neuschwanstein is the castle that Walt Disney based The Wonderful World of Disney castle off of.
Right. The Disneyland castle.
Exactly. And it is a castle dedicated to, of all things, the operas of Joseph Wagner.
Or at least the grotto in the basement is, yeah.
Oh, no, actually, almost all the rooms.
That's true. I suppose there were murals in most of the rooms. That's true.
Yes.
Right.
It is one of, if not the most popular tourist attraction in Germany. It is up on a hill. There are three ways to get there. You can either hoof it, which takes about 45 minutes. It's up a relatively steep hill, probably about a 8 to 10% incline. It can be physically challenging. You can also take a bus, which will drop you off about 2/3 of the way up. And then the way that we chose to go up is to take a horse and carriage.
Oh, okay.
To me, it just seems like it's more authentic because you just know in your head that's how Mad King Ludwig got taken up to his castle.
Minus the paved road, of course, but yes.
Sure. Well, and we call him Mad King Ludwig based on how he spent the money for the Kingdom of Bavaria that he was king of. And he was actually a constitutional monarch, but building castles as if he were a medieval monarch. Neuschwanstein is contemporary with the Eiffel Tower, which a lot of people don't realize when they're looking at it. Yeah. Drowned under mysterious circumstances, as I recall.
He did. He managed to live in his castle for 172 days.
Yep.
On day number 171, the authorities come in and tell him in his bedroom, King Ludwig, you have been declared insane, and therefore you will no longer rule Bavaria. And the next day, he and his psychiatrist were walking along a small lakeshore in Munich where they somehow managed to drown in 2 feet of water. And no one knows if they drowned of their own accord or of someone else's accord. It is one of the great mysteries of Bavaria. But because Neuschwanstein is such a popular tourist attraction, you actually don't get much time to spend in the castle. You have to buy your tickets at the bottom. You can buy them in English and German, and then they have kind of an audio guided tour for several other languages. But they whip you through that castle. I think we had about 45 minutes in the castle. So if you can picture the Disney castle and how long it would take to go through the legitimate Disney castle and then blow that out some order of magnitude greater, you realize that you get taken through that castle very, very quickly. So our joke was the tour was something along the lines of, okay, here's the room where he has the altar from this opera. All right, let's go. All right, here's some windows. Go. Here's the bedroom. Go.
Yeah, you really do sort of feel rushed, and you don't get to see, obviously, a whole lot of the castle, because the castle was never finished. Ludwig died, and he was so in debt already with the castle that they said, forget it, we're not finishing this. And it was actually opened up to the public about 6 weeks after his death, so they could start trying to
I didn't realize that. Interesting.
Recoup some of the funds that he had poured into this thing. You don't get to see a lot, and you do feel really rushed on the tour, but at the same time, you can't not do it. Just sort of know that going into it, that you're not going to see a lot. But they do have a wonderful guidebook that goes into much further detail than the tour, so I recommend picking that up. It's only about €11.
We're not into the schlocky, touristy books. We're the type that pulls out the pages of The Lonely Planet or The Footprints Guide. But that book, even though it's got kind of the cheesy looking touristy cover, is actually very full of very good information. The other part of the Neuschwanstein experience that we recommend, although it is not recommended for those who have a significant fear of heights, is to hike up the hill
to the bridge
and to go to the Marienbrücke, which is the bridge above and behind Neuschwanstein. I think that is probably the best view of Neuschwanstein. Unfortunately, when we were there, they were doing some renovations, so you see the best view of all the scaffolding. But it's still a gorgeous, gorgeous view. And then if you're into hiking, they have some hikes that are between 3 and 4 hours. And then at the bottom, you can hike around the Alpensee, which will take you into Austria as well. The Alpensee is the lake. It's probably about a 4 to 6 hour hike to get around the Alpensee.
Neuschwanstein is a wonderful destination, and especially if you know, again, as we said, that it's almost a monument to the Romanticism period. And around that time, a lot of things like this were being constructed, sort of hearkening back to the Middle Ages style.
Yes. Even though it's a monument to Wagnerian-era operas, it's built in a way that I agree reflects back more to the Romantic times. One room that you go in, there's a tile floor, and it's a mosaic, and it's made of over 2 million individual pieces of tile, which is just an incredibly impressive feat. The bed, there's a giant carving that they said took 4 carvers, I want to say something on the order of 2 years to actually carve. So there are just some amazing pieces of workmanship inside of that castle, which meant that the rest of Bavaria must have gone broke. It is a significant work, and it's up a not so insignificant piece of the Alps that you have to go climb up to bring everything up there. So it had to be a very intense work of labor, so I'm sure that took quite a toll. But my gosh, the views after he got done are amazing. After Neuschwanstein, which is about an hour and a half to 2 hours south of Munich, we went up to Munich. If you want to do public transportation, the train will take you down to a town called Füssen, F-U with an umlaut, S-S-E-N. And then there are buses that take you down to Neuschwanstein. It's about a 2-hour train trip from Füssen into Munich. You can drive as well. The Autobahn serves it very, very well. So it's easy to get around in that area. It's served both by train, by Autobahn, and by buses. So we went to Munich. Munich is a city that has undergone some significant rebirths. It was bombed very, very heavily during World War II. So most of the architecture that you see is actually reconstructed.
Right.
A couple of the highlights. First of all, if you go during the weekends, expect to see very large crowds in their Altstadt. It is, I believe, the third largest city in Germany and is one of the bigger tourist attractions. So you will see a lot of people in Munich. So just be prepared for the crowds. They're all very friendly. I never got the feeling that there was anything besides just a large number of people. As you go into the Altstadt, first of all, there are lots of old churches. The first highlight that we hit that we really liked was the glockenspiel. Okay. It's like the clock inside of Nurenburg, except for it's probably on a scale about 2 times as large. It has 2 separate little scenes, and this has to do with the wedding of a prince and his princess. One is of the bridal ceremony and procession, so you get to see the groomsmen and the bridesmaids. And then the other part is the knights jousting tournament that they had to celebrate this wedding. Now, the glockenspiel only plays during certain times of the day, so I believe it's 11 and 12 and then at 5 p.m. And again, if you want to avoid the crowds, our recommendation is to go up. So if you're facing the glockenspiel, behind you is a building that's got a shopping mall. On the 5th floor is a cafe called Cafe Glockenspiel. We highly recommend that you get a cappuccino or a coffee and you sit at a window seat facing the glockenspiel. And you'll be able to see, and you'll still be able to hear, even though usually the windows are closed. You can hear everything. It's really more one to see because there's bells going off everywhere because there are a lot of churches. Sit up there, get a bird's eye view. It's probably one of the best views of the glockenspiel that you can have.
Excellent.
The second one that we liked is called the Asamkirche, Asamkirche. It is literally wedged between 2 what look like houses, and it's very, very easy to miss, but it's got some great Gothic and Baroque carvings and paintings and is just a beautiful, beautiful church. It's very small. We estimated that the pews could probably only hold about 200 people. They're very aware that it's a church that has a lot of history and a lot of art and just a lot of neat things to look at crammed into a very, very small building. But they're also aware that they're a church first and foremost. So they put up some signs to that regard. So just make sure that if you go in that you are quiet. They tend to have people usually there praying, but they also welcome people to come in and to tour. And usually with these older churches in Germany, I guess for lack of a better description, they have collection boxes all around the church. So if you have a euro coin or a 50-cent coin, it's usually accepted to drop some little small donation in so that they can maintain the churches that you're getting to see. So they usually don't charge a fee to go in. But you can help them out by making a donation so that you're not just a free rider to these churches. The third thing that we saw, which is probably the stereotypical Bavarian experience, is called the Hofbrauhaus.
Okay. I assume we would get there eventually.
Yes, that is one of the oldest beer halls in Bavaria, if not in Germany. If you have an image in your mind of what German beer halls are like, with the women in their traditional Bavarian dresses, which are called dirndls, carrying 6, 7, 8 liters worth of beer, very, very jolly, with the Oompa band in the background.
You're going to get it.
You are describing the Hofbrauhaus. It's an experience like none other that I ever had in Germany. There are what look like, for all intents and purposes, very, very large picnic tables. And everyone's sitting around these very, very large picnic tables having very, very large pieces of meat and very large steins of beer. They're actually called Krugs. And a Krug is a liter of beer. It's going to cost you about 8 euro. And there's an accepted method for doing your toast. So when you get your Krug of beer, it's expected that you will toast everyone at the table with your Krug of beer. So what you do is you hold your beer and you slam it up against the other glasses of beer. Don't worry, you're not going to break the glasses. They're made of some indestructible form of glass. And then you look the person that you're toasting in the eye, you put your glass down and then you pick it up and you drink. The reason is that the original festival was celebrated by a very, very old king. And so the old king was not strong enough to actually hold up these glasses for a very long time. So you would splash the glasses together so that everyone's beer mixed, so that if you had poisoned the king's beer, you were also going to drink the poisoned beer. Then you would put the glass down because the king's arm got tired and you had to give the king a break. And then you had to look everyone in the eye for good luck. There are some other stories about that which probably are not family friendly. And then you would drink. It's very traditional. It goes back to the times when they first started the beer houses and the beer festivals. So if you want the quintessential Bavarian beer hall experience and you're willing to fight all the tourist crowds, then definitely go to the Hofbrauhaus. The other event that Munich is known for is where the most beer in the world is consumed, and that's at the Oktoberfest. Mm-hmm. And Oktoberfest is usually the second to last and last week of September and the first week of October. And it's where all the breweries of Munich set up very, very large fest tents, and they have a celebration. It's effectively a harvest celebration, but for 3 weeks, from noon to 10 p.m. of the enjoyment of beer and all the things that are pertinent to the enjoyment of beer, like pretzels and carnival rides. I always wondered how you could go into a beer tent, have a couple of liters of beer, and then decide that carnival rides would be very fun. But apparently this is something that the Germans do with a great amount of relish. So if you want to go for Oktoberfest, it is a great opportunity to meet millions and millions of new friends who will all be your best friend after about 3 minutes of drinking beer with them. Very, very friendly time, but just be prepared for very, very large crowds. One thing that some of your younger listeners might be interested in, kids will enjoy what is called the Spielzeug Museum, which is in the old town hall.
It's a toy museum then.
And this had a very, very dark beginning. It is where Goebbels made his speech that started the Kristallnacht, or the Night of the Long Knives. Okay. So one of the very first pogroms against the Jews was started here. And so the Germans are very aware of this to kind of get rid of that old past. They have a toy museum there.
Interesting.
Which is very fun for the young kids. For your 18 to early 30-somethings who are still doing the backpacker through Europe types of trips, a great place to stay is called the Kapuziner Holzel. Okay. It is a giant circus tent. Huh. It's on the outskirts, but very easy to access by the trams.
Summer only then?
It is summer only, okay. And it only costs a few euro. They give you a mat, 4 blankets, and you go mark out your place to stay. And then in the morning, they wake everyone up and roust them out. You get some granola and some hot tea, and they send you on your way. It's a really neat experience. It's very, very cheap. It's camping with 1,000 of your closest friends.
All right.
Oh, and one thing that I forgot to cover about Rothenburg. So Rothenburg was a free state. It wasn't defeated for many years. And so one of the stories about how Rothenburg stayed free was that it actually had fallen. I believe this might have been in the Napoleonic times, and the army threatened to burn the town.
I think it was the 30 Years' War, as I recall.
Oh, yes, you're right. It is. It's the 30 Years' War. The invading troops threatened to burn down the town, and the mayor said, I will cut you a deal. If I can drink 3.5 liters of wine in one gulp, then you will spare my town. And so the clock tower is a testament.
That's right.
To the mayor consuming 3.5 liters of wine in one gulp. And Rothenburg was actually spared during World War II as well. Right. I'm probably giving away the Night Watchman tour.
It is the end of the Night Watchman tour. That is true.
Yes. So if you want to save the ending for the Night Watchman tour, then fast forward a minute. The general who was in charge of taking over that area had ordered bombings, and there was a lieutenant colonel on his staff named Devens, whose mother had a print of Rothenburg. She had gone to Rothenburg. She had been so impressed by it. She had bought a print, brought it back, and would tell this man when he was a kid, she would tell him stories about Rothenburg and how beautiful it was. And so when he found out that it was going to be bombed, he actually convinced the major of the German army who was in charge of defending Rothenburg to abandon the town. And so while about a third of it was bombed, because there was a print in the house of one of the staff members when he was growing up, he spared the rest of the town. And also because of the bravery of that German major who basically gave the town up. And if his high command had found out what he had done, he would have been hanged for treason or shot for treason.
They were ordered to hold to the last man, as I recalled, but he also valued the town.
It took the confluence of some pretty amazing coincidences, but Rothenburg was saved. And that's why it's actually well liked as a tourist attraction, because it's got the old buildings. And one of the oldest buildings in Rothenburg has a foundation that dates back to the 900s. And it's a pub. And it's called Hell. Literally, that is the translation. Zur Hölle. The joke is, in Rothenburg, if someone tells you to go to hell, it's actually a good idea because it's a tavern.
Now, before this turns into a 2 or 3 part episode, we should start to wind this down. And we're going to skip a lot of our standard questions here because I think we've covered a lot of things. But just the one moment you really know you're in Bavaria, you really know you're in southern Germany, when what?
Gosh, just looking at the countryside, it was just like you've seen in pictures and in movies and on TV. It was absolutely beautiful and very clean and well kept. You can tell that they take a lot of pride in their land.
Okay.
And for me, the moment you know you're in Bavaria is when you're having the Bavarian sausage with a glass of beer.
Okay. That's the white sausage, as I recall.
Yes.
Weisswurst?
Yes.
Okay. And if we had to summarize Bavaria, southern Germany, in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Charming, quaint, relaxed.
Okay.
My 3 will be schön, freundlich, und Geschichte.
Okay, so I've got pretty,
beautiful,
friendly,
and history.
And history, okay. Janie and Jason, thank you so much for coming back on the show and talking about southern Germany.
Thank you very much. It's always wonderful to chat with you, Chris.
I'm going to skip internet resources for this week because I'm trying to get this show out and it's already of a certain length. I did have an interesting comment left by JT. Normally I would be excited to see that the new Amateur Traveler is posted and would immediately download with much joy. This time, however, I must protest. To post a show about China, my only reaction can be to demur. I cannot in good conscience listen to someone speak positively about a country where enforced abortion, summary public executions, the flooding of random villages, and the imprisoning of citizens based solely upon their religious affiliation is commonplace. To podcast about China and to seemingly treat it with the same respect that one would any other free country is to accept and elevate a country that will not, nor ever will, respond in kind. I hope the next podcast is one I can enjoy. Apologies. I appreciated the thoughtful and considerate tone that this was written. We do disagree on this. Not necessarily that I approve of all of the politics in China. That's not what I'm saying. But my approach toward travel is that in general, if we don't go to some country, if we don't talk to those people, that we have no influence on them. And there are 2 schools of thought on this. I'm surprised I didn't get more protests, for instance, when we talked about Myanmar, which is definitely a place that we could debate going, or even when we did a show on Cuba. But there are at least 2 schools of thought here. One, for instance, which is let's cut off from people until they reform to the way that we would like. And the other one being let's engage. And I fall in the second school of thought. I had some interesting communication with Scott and Cheryl, who were on the show talking about the year they spent in Europe, which they documented on the wonderful podcast A Year in Europe. And we had been trying to get them on to do a follow-up show, a live show, question and answer, and I've really had a hard time getting a hold of them, and I just found out why. They are the proud parents of twin 11-month-old girls. So congratulations to both Scott and Cheryl. And we understand why you're busy. With that, I'm awful busy this weekend too, so we're going to wrap up this podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment like JT did, or drop an email at host@amateurtraveler.com, or catch me on Twitter like Scott did at twitter.com/Chris2X. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral.